name?
Yeah, SAVANNA-GARNICK.
Okay, cool. That's what I thought. Wonderful. So I had a just an opening question for Gloria that you are welcome to answer too, which was like, it seems like in some ways the impetus for this group was independent thinking and like a healthy dose of skepticism in terms of like an official narrative or in terms of what you're hearing from experts. You know, and I've seen you guys put that in quotes or whatnot, but I was wondering if that feels accurate, and if so, like where that comes from.
You want to go first, Savannah?
Okay,
seeing
sure.
as she, I think this group kind of began a lot because of the hard work Savannah did writing her dissertation, so to speak.
Sure.
I guess a healthy amount of skepticism is always good. In general, when you're living your life and
Sure.
you're buying a car or you're going to a school, and I think that it's common for you to check things out and figure out what feels right, or if this is a good fit, or if these are,
Sure.
is this car salesman saying the right thing? Is this truthful? And I think that includes health. I'm actually a holistic nutritionist, so
Yeah.
I've spent the last 10 years of my life focusing on health.
Yeah.
So that is really, what I am focused on mostly.
Right.
And so when when things started, when the whole pandemic started, of course everybody was like, well, what's going on? This is, we had no idea about anything. We were just kind of hearing things, hearsay. And so I was really curious, especially because it has to do with health. And things, I just kind of like dove in and just tried to figure out what's happening. I've never listened to news stations. Like, I'm not one that, I just never have. I've never listened to like CNN or, don't read like New York Times or anything like that. I just normally do my own research, and as far as figuring out news,
Like even
sources.
before the pandemic.
Oh yeah,
that kind
it's
of
like
just
it's
how
not,
you
you're
work.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And I'm not like, I don't necessarily use Google is not my king, but
Is there another king?
I would never say king, because I think you have to be leery of I think those are hard words, but I think that you just have to have some common sense when you're looking at information. And but I do use DuckDuckGo quite a bit. It doesn't track your private. It's a private search engine. And they seem to have very, very differing. You put one thing into one and put another thing into one, you get very, very different results. Very different results.
Sure.
So anyway, I guess I just did a bunch of research, just not research necessarily, but I was just trying to figure out what's going on. And I think maybe the first thing that I listened to that was like, oh wow, what's happening? Because it made me start thinking, there was the cruise line that all got COVID right in the beginning.
Yeah.
And there was a man that was interviewed by somebody that I've listened to one of his podcasts, and he was interviewed, and him and his wife were quarantined, and it was kind of the first person that I'd ever heard that had COVID, and he kind of said all the things like, I don't know, I had a little bit of a flu, no big deal, my wife never got it, so I was just thinking, okay, this is interesting. We're being shown that this is like so scary, because we were at that point. Who knew what was going on, right? And so I was like, oh, that's really interesting. He's, they were in maybe their 60s. They were older, very, or maybe they were, I don't know exactly. I just know that they were older, an older couple on that cruise line. Anyway, so it just got me thinking, and I just started to delve deeper, and things just didn't match what was being told to the community or what I was being told. And maybe because I don't listen to mainstream media and these type of things, maybe that I was like, well, it seems there's so much discrepancy in what's happening. So then I think that just kind of forced me to ask more questions. I think that's the biggest thing, is that like asking questions. Okay, I feel confused about these things. I just would like an answer. And I feel like my public officials, all these people, the health officials in Jackson, and also the state, of course, like our main public officials, the CDC, and they just were not answering the questions. I feel like it was like, hey, I have this question, but you're not actually answering it fully to what I'm asking. And so I just started digging, and I found a lot of a lot of scientists and really, Nobel laureates and different doctors and, amazing people that are like, molecular biologists talking and saying very different things. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. I don't have an opinion either way, as far as like, I'm just gathering information. I'm just trying to understand. And as a business owner, I was saying, okay, I'm being like affected so much. My family's mental health is being like crushed. I had siblings that were so much anxiety and so much insanity over the whole COVID thing that it was debilitating. And I was like, okay, what is going on in this? And things were just not adding up. And I care so much about the health of my family, the people that I love.
Sure.
And that's what I do in my profession. And so I was like, okay, there has to be a better solution. I do know this. I do know that, you do take care of your immune system. I don't care what it is that is, attacking us. I think that those things are not being talked about, which is confusing to me. Why aren't we talking about health on a real level? We're saying that a mask is health or a vaccine is health. And to me, as a health professional, those are fine. I'm not saying that those are not solutions.
They're Band-Aids. They're not a preventative treatment.
So that was also
vaccines,
another thing that I was like, okay, I'm having these questions because why aren't we talking about health in this way, or just like normal health, like vitamins and minerals and sunshine and moving your bodies and all these things. And then some of the recommendations that they were implementing seemed very counterintuitive to what I consider to be health. So all these things just came about. Literally, though, I was the only person that I knew that was asking these questions. I felt like, I was like, maybe I'm the only one that knows what's going on. And because of the social pressure of, it's not okay to question the science, or it's not okay to question the authorities. And so I was like, okay, well, I have questions. This doesn't make sense to me. And so in January of last year, I wrote a dissertation called my COVID dissertation, and it's basically a 16-page document that had all these questions. I cited, what did I say, 98?
Over 90
scientific studies, just questioning these things. I got information from the Wyoming Health Board about influenza and all these different things, and was comparing. I'm not like a scientist, but I'm a critical thinker, and I can add 2 + 2. And so and then I represented this document to the entire state of Wyoming, anyone that was in any sort of public authority. And I didn't hear anything back from anybody, really. One person I did, but and it was very frustrating because I was like, okay, I'm a concerned citizen, and can I just have a conversation with somebody about these things? Nobody would have this conversation. Nobody would engage in anything. And I think that the fear of going against the grain was so plausible that nobody would engage in that with me. So truthfully felt like I was on my own, did not have anybody besides some of my close family members that were asking the same questions. And so I was like, okay, I can't be the only person in this town, especially. So I created a website, and I said, okay, maybe I can engage some people. Maybe some people will find this, and we can come together. We can actually just talk, maybe even some health professionals. I talked to Dr. Blue. He was actually one of the only health professionals that would actually have a conversation with me, and I quoted him a lot in my paper. And he was saying a lot of the same things. Now, he's very, very, very pro-vaccine. Nothing that I ever say is against anything. I think everyone should be able to make their own choices when it comes to their medical decisions, talking with their practitioners. And it's a very intimate thing. I'm never saying that nobody should do anything. That's a very personal decision. But I think that it is about choice, and I feel like that's also not being addressed here as a personal choice. So, and then we, around May, I guess, came across some ladies that were fighting in the school board against the mask mandates. And so someone contacted me and said, hey, can we just have a night together where we can just discuss and we just talk about it? And I was like, yes, I'd love to do that. And so we had a small get together. It was probably 9 of us, or maybe 10 of us.
Yeah.
And it was just so refreshing to have a conversation about just being able and unafraid to voice my opinions. I literally you can't have these conversations. People will back down. I've lost a lot of friends. I've lost some family members that think I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist because I'm asking questions. And because I have a different opinion that's not the narrative. Let me tell you what, it is not easy going against the mainstream narrative. It is not. It sucks. It's hard. And we're not doing it because we get anything out of it. We're doing it because I believe that there's something going on that is untruthful, or that I'm just asking for transparency, a conversation, something that will, anything. I feel like I'm being censored majorly on Instagram and on Facebook, even in my own town. So it's really difficult. And then we formed this Telegram group, and some people started joining, and I was introduced to her by a friend of ours, and
inviting like the Telegram invitations, and that's how I came in. Was I think it was early October. I had like 3 or 4 different people reach out to me and say, have you heard about this Telegram group? I think you might want to join. And so I jumped on in early October, and I myself had felt a bit like an island since May, I think, probably April of 2020. And for me, it started all about just data in particular. I don't have a background in health, but as Savannah said, I would also call myself a critical thinker. And so for me, it started out as I was reading the original health, just the guidance. I read them word for word, ad nauseum, and it surprised me how many people never had read any of even the original guidances from our health department or the order itself, weren't even aware of the wording in there. Some people didn't even know that there were citations that were attached, or fines that could be levied. And that really just concerned me, because I'm thinking you're agreeing to something and you're supporting it, but you haven't even read it, because that's just the way my brain thinks, is it's very logically. And so for me at the start was I caught like a number of errors in the original drafted mask order. One of them was a hospitalization rate that was over counted by something like 100%, and it was a mistake. And I pointed it out to Dr. Riddell early on, and he responded right away like, oh, wow, sorry about that. I fixed it. But I was just thinking, how would that not look strange to you as you write an order? Anyway, so for me, it was all about data. And then as Savannah was doing kind of on her own, I myself was like, well, the way I handle uncertain things in my life, whether it's just a new hobby or being a parent, or is to research and to try to get information from as many sources as possible. That's how my mom raised me. She was like, I don't repeat something until I've verified it by about at least 3 sources. And so I was raised that way. So I don't see something on the internet and immediately share it. I want typically, I want to make sure I reference it and have it backed up. But one of the things that I found very early on is when it was pretty clear that they had figured out that COVID spread nearly identically to other respiratory viruses like influenza. I was like, okay, well, what is the protocol for influenza? The existing protocol for influenza. So I get on the CDC and on the WHO and World Health, and I look it up, and sure enough, I find the guidance from CDC, and it's still there for influenza, is they don't recommend universal masking. And the reason they don't is because it's fairly known that most transmission is happening in close contact settings. Typically, they're happening within people's homes, within people's private social settings. It's not happening likely at the grocery store. It is not likely happening walking around the street or going into a retail store for 15 minutes. They know this. They knew this about influenza. And so what the CDC says about influenza is universal masking is not recommended, because you would literally have to have individuals wear masks pretty much 24 hours a day, including when they're in their home. And there's no way to enforce that. There's really no way, unless we have police going door to door and
draconian measures.
And draconian measures of knocking on your door, coming into your house with your roommates, making sure, okay, we saw you wore your mask in the grocery store, but you're not wearing it while you sit here and watch TV with your friends. Well, in truth, that's where the spread is happening. It's when you're sitting on your couch next to your roommate watching TV. It's not when you go to the produce section. So for me, as a logical, critical thinker, I'm like, we have this mask order that the cohort who's suffering the most from it are children. Because the rest of us can kind of like pick and choose where and when we go somewhere for a duration of time to suffer a mask. You know, unless you're working 8 hours a day in a public space, then you're suffering as well. But generally, a lot of us, you know, we have certain work shifts. We can get out of it. Children can't. You know, they go to school and all day long they're being told, pull it up, pull it up, pull it up. My daughter, who was a senior last year, finally opted out of in-person school for many reasons. One, you know, it's her senior year and she's being asked to sit at a lunch table all by herself outside, not with her friends. She was hit incredibly hard, depression-wise, anxiety-wise. I mean, I was very fearful for a while there that I literally would open her door with a little bit of trepidation. And I'm sorry, where I'm like, is she, you know, will she have harmed herself? Because it was a very hard time for her. Sorry. So it was very rough at home watching my daughter go through that. And also just, once again, the absurdity of it. Because she was being asked to do these things at school. But then those kids were all getting together after school. You know, that was the absurdity of it. To me, it's like, it would be like as a restaurant owner asking somebody to hop on one foot through the restaurant because I don't want to mop as much. You know, it just logically, these things just didn't make sense to me. So I was already, you know, doing these things. And I think a lot of the people who are part of the Alliance now, they were kind of spectating what I was doing publicly through commissioner meetings and town council meetings and writing letters and posting on Facebook. And they saw how I definitely was a bit of a social pariah, you know, and oftentimes very publicly flogged, you know, in the public court of opinion, you know, of social media. And so I think a lot of people who on the side were also questioning and looking at it logically, saying this just doesn't really make sense. There must be a better way that holistically we can still protect those who are vulnerable. We can still try to limit transmission, but not wrecking the whole cohesive fabric of our community, you know, without dividing us all in such a way where you run into people in public and they literally look at you like you're a vermin, you know, that you're something that could kill them. And so I think a lot of the people in the Alliance, before we formally became the Alliance, saw what was happening to those of us who did speak publicly, and I definitely was kind of a little bit of the front runner for that. And it probably made them even more afraid to speak up because they saw what was happening to me. But so when this happened, when these few moms at the school board meeting, you know, showed up and all of a sudden realized like, oh, it's not just one. It's not just me. One mother was like, she was like, am I the only one who doesn't want a mask on my child all day long? But then she meets these other women. And then they, you know, connect with Savannah, and then next thing you know, there's 20 of us, and then there's 30 of us, and then there's 150 of us, and then there's over 200 of us. And yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of the story of how the Alliance was formed. And yeah, to reiterate what Savannah said, and as we said last night you missed it, it was pretty great, it was packed in here, is that we're, you know, the Alliance is not anti anything. I mean, there's a number of the members of our Alliance who have either chosen to be vaccinated or maybe felt like they had to be vaccinated because of work or a family that's vulnerable. Many of us have family members who are vaccinated. My husband's vaccinated. He's a paramedic. There's not judgment in the Alliance. Like she was saying, it's all about transparency and informed consent. And that what we feel like is that we are not getting enough information from public health or mainstream media. We just aren't. And so, you know, and not many people either feel like they have the time to seek that information out themselves, or they're just overwhelmed because it's a lot of information to try to sort through and digest.
It's so much, and I understand why you want to just fully trust, you know, your leaders, your health officials. Of course, I get it. I really do get it. And at the same time, you wouldn't go into a surgery if someone told you, you know, you had some life-threatening surgery and not get a second opinion.
No, you just
right?
wouldn't. You wouldn't. If
I just
somebody
don't think
said,
you
like,
would.
you know what, Savannah, I know that you're of reproductive age, but, you know, my opinion is that there's something wrong with your uterus. We're going to remove it. Like, would you just be like, oh, yeah, sure? Or would you be like,
Maybe-
you know,
and maybe
I might
people do
see
that, you know?
another, I might see just one more doctor, you know, just to be sure.
One question, and not to just
sorry.
interrupt everything that you just said. I'll come back to that for a sec. But you know, on that point, you know, there is like trust is a tricky thing, especially around medical procedures, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you were recommended for an elective surgery, do you feel like you'd be the kind of person who would want to do like as much research and talk to as many people beforehand as
Oh,
possible?
100%. Yeah, I would do that with anything in my life,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
You know, I don't just say yes to anything. But of course, when it's something that is going to physically manipulate any part of my body,
Yeah.
because that's something that I'm very, you know, that's basically where I put all of my attention is my body for myself. As a practitioner of health,
Sure.
you know, that is like this is my temple, right? So of
Yeah.
course I would,
Yeah.
of course I would, and it makes a big impact not only on me but on my loved ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course I would.
Gotcha, yeah.
I wouldn't just blindly go into anything.
Sure, yeah,
But
yeah.
I think that's the problem too. Is that it's not a problem, but I want people to be able to have transparent communication with their physicians, with their doctors, with their health practitioners, and I don't feel like we're necessarily getting that transparent, you know, information.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just, you know, blindly going into these things that, well, if we had a conversation, if there was a conversation that was being had, or a debate of scientists that really believe this way and scientists that really believe this way, we're not having this, you know, democratic debate that we should be as a country, a free country, the United States of America. That's like what we're founded on. We're not having those conversations, like let alone in our country, but right here in our town, which actually is the only place that we can make a difference right now, and that is directly affecting us. We're not having these. We're not allowed to have these conversations.
Yeah.
We're being silenced. We're being shut out. And I feel like that doesn't seem okay to me.
Yeah.
Not just
yeah.
silenced, yeah.
One,
Vilified.
one other question there, and then I'll try to respond to what you both said in the introduction, is like, for my conversation with the health department, I understand that like every decision they make is very difficult, and they have a lot of discussions internally about what's best for the community. And you know, I wonder if maybe those discussions were more visible to folks, if that would give a greater sense of ease once something does become a recommendation or even a mandate, to see some of the decision making that went in.
I think that having that transparency, for sure. I think what's difficult inside those, that's what we're trying to say, is like, hey, we're seeing very different. Dr. Blue is a good example of that. He's a physician that's very I use that pro-vaccine because for some reason we've been labeled as anti-vaxxer people.
Right.
So that's why I have to say that, because, you know, we're not anti-anything. But he was addressing Travis Riddell. He was, you know, saying, hey, I hope that you can get to these people. I hope that you can make some, you know, leeway, because it's impossible. And so I think that they're unwilling to have discussion with anything outside of that, you know, their little cohort of.
It's the echo chamber.
Exactly.
And even, you know, Commissioner Newcomb, who is definitely, I would say, sort of, he's doing a good job of kind of asking questions, but he's definitely kind of in the middle. Like he's very respectful and more trusting, I would say, than I am of public health, but he's asking questions, and even he described that cohort of essentially, you know, Jody Pond, Dr. Riddell, and the public health department as an echo chamber. And I would agree with you. I think that having those conversations public, or at least providing minutes or recordings of meetings, I think it would help. And we've asked for a public forum. We've been asking for I think a month now, and Commissioner Epstein has asked for it as well. He posed a suggestion that perhaps the commission could set up a town hall style meeting, and
I think
it was shut down though by Commissioner Chairwoman Macker and Probst, and so that's very frustrating, because if we were able to ask questions directly to our public health officials.
That's exactly right. Because right now we just go. We have 3 minutes to say our little bits.
It's tough.
And there's no.
It's not a conversation.
There's no conversation.
But,
It's not like,
yeah.
hey, I have a question, and then we have this little. It's not a debate because I think it's not. We're not debating, but we're just
Yeah.
simply conversating. But we're not allowed to have that, right?
To the point about it feeling like public health is an echo chamber, that's where I wonder if, because they then make these decisions and recommendations and the mandates come out as this is public health's decision.
Right.
I mean, you don't get to see the dissenting beliefs that do exist within the
Right.
department.
Right.
And so,
And within the department, there are nurses that have spoken up and have tried to have that conversation with that public health, with their
Yeah.
with their
Yeah.
you know, with their
Yeah.
bosses and everything, and they are very, very, quickly and swiftly shut
Yeah.
down and shut up and considered conspiracy because they themselves cannot have a dissenting opinion.
And the other issue is or problem, I don't want to say issue, but concern is that when our questions, and they're just not just our questions, there's over 200 people and probably even more that just are just going through the grind of daily life and they don't want to get involved. But when our specific questions have been asked by a few of the commissioners who have taken those questions and passed them on to during the COVID updates, the answers oftentimes are just incomplete and not even on point. Like, for example, Jody, they're kind of dismissed. So, for example, Jody Pond was asked, if you're going to recommend or,
I saw that.
yeah, the masks is provide long-term research, and Dr. Paul Beaupre specifically said there's no research yet.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know long-term
It's new.
yet. That's when I say informed consent.
Yeah.
So if you're going to say do this or take this,
Yeah.
you need to also have, just so you know, though, we don't know yet the long-term effects.
So again, do you feel that level of nuance would be helpful? Like, would you feel either like more understood, or would you feel like it was less of like a blind rubber stamp? If people
Absolutely.
describe-
Absolutely. I think that if it was more of a open and transparent, I mean, I'm not saying everything can be a discussion and a debate, because
no,
they have
I
the time
understand.
for that. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I mean, there's other things going on in this community besides COVID that public health is working,
Yeah.
water, air. But I do think at least if those discussions, because like Jody has said that, like, well, when we change the metrics, this is a conversation that we had for a long, long, long time. We'll share the details of those conversations, like how you came to those decisions and conclusions that mean that right now we have masks on, but yet when we had these same numbers in the past, we did not, and we were in yellow, but now we're in red. Like that.
No,
Having that explained would be
helpful, yeah.
well, it's like a parent. Like, what kid loves when their parent just says, because I said so. There's a time for that when they're little children. If I tell my kid, get the heck out of the street right now, I'm not going to have a conversation with them about it. It's because I said so. But when you get to a point of being able to reason with your child, which I have children that I can reason with, I don't say because I said so anymore.
No, I hear it. That's the other night. Okay, so just to respond to the opening where you're talking about kind of how this came together and understanding that like that there has been an emotional toll, an emotional kind of impact by both the pandemic and then by the health the precautions, the mandates that have gone into place. Right, both have had an impact. I am curious how those. How the labels about groups that are counter to popular narrative, how those have impacted that organization too. Because I know you guys kind of have like pretty firmly come out and said like we're not anti-vaxxers and we're not like anti-maskers either, right? Like I think there's a stigma with both terms, and I know that and as I think I mentioned to you, like when there's a label, then it's easier to dismiss no matter what the label is.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, they're just of that mindset. It also lumps you guys in with like very real movements that are happening in the country right now that I'm not sure you'd wanted to be part of. But I just wanted to understand the distinction because it does feel like to me there's a resistance to both masks and to vaccines. And I understand that your resistance, you're saying, is more towards the fact that they're mandated. And I understand that too. Like that's a huge component. Plenty of people are like, I support the vaccine, but I think it needs to be a personal choice. That's what the governor said, right?
Right.
But is there also, and even in the group, you guys can speak on your own behalf or on what you think the group thinks. Like, is there a feeling like a lack of trust in both the vaccines and in the effectiveness of masks?
Well, I wouldn't say there's a lack. I think that, yes, everything should be a choice. And whether or not you know the information, the scientific research, or you don't, that's your choice, And I think that you should be able to make those read those studies or not, or whatever
Sure.
it is that you think is best for you.
Sure.
Me personally, from all the study that I have done,
Yep.
and many, scientists and doctors that I've spoken to and had conversation with,
Yeah.
that also, it's like I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist.
No, sure.
So yeah, it's easy for people to dismiss my opinion because I'm not those things. But that doesn't mean that I can't come to an understanding based on my knowledge of a lot of scientific research that I've read in the last 2 years, that I feel like wow, I should maybe become a scientist. I've read so many damn scientific literature. That yes, no, there is not. I don't personally believe that there is study that supports that masks are effective. There's very inconclusive studies. There's no study out there.
That's like kind of a different framing than saying you don't believe masks are effective.
I think that within certain situations and very strategic ways of what mask you're wearing and how it's done, then yes, I think that they can be effective to a degree of whatever it is that you're trying to be,
Okay.
protected against.
Yep.
But I think
Yep.
that this mask,
Universal masking.
Universal
We're talking
masking.
about universal masking,
Yeah.
not mask use
Yeah.
in particular settings.
Exactly.
I mean, my husband's a paramedic. So he, throughout his career is going to be picking up patients who could be virulent in some sort of way.
Yeah.
Prior to this, they would only put a mask on if they were with a known
Sure.
influenza case or something like this. It wasn't an assumption that every patient could potentially be
Yeah.
spreading a disease.
Yeah.
Do I believe personally that a mask, if you are symptomatic, sneezing, coughing, will limit the amount of droplets that you express into the air? Absolutely.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, I guess,
yeah.
is it's a nuanced perspective on that too.
Totally.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's
because
like,
how can you say?
understand this.
How can you say, like, this is black and this is white?
Yeah.
How do you say that?
One question I'd have for you
Yeah.
is you had made a Facebook post about masking, and it was flagged by Facebook as misinformation.
Which one?
Sure. But
Yeah.
but when that happens, so it's happened more
Yep.
than once.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what's the reaction to that?
Comedy. I laugh. I realize that Facebook actually, it's not a person. I'm very aware that it's not a person. Now, sometimes it is. There are fact checkers as well.
Yeah,
but I think a lot of those are literally their algorithms. It's literally an algorithm on a computer that is looking for certain
I mean, this
words.
is a specific one that said, you're
Gotcha,
posting and
yeah.
asking, it said identified by independent fact checkers.
I find
That happens all the time.
I find it comical, especially when I go back and I look at, and I think I might know the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
And when I look and I rewatch it or I reread it, and I'm like, how can any of this be? It's not really disputable. Like it's presenting like science, and a lot of those peer reviewed.
It's presenting like science. But are you convinced, even once it's flagged that way, that it's not misinformation?
Am I convinced it's not? Like, does Facebook flagging it make me think it's misinformation?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. No,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a fair
it's a valid
response, but I just
question.
wonder, it comes up. Because that's the thing too. Like, there's been this distinction lately as disinformation being like intentionally distributed falsities, and I don't get the sense that that's what you're doing. Like, you believe what you're posting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
is
And if
valid.
I find, like, for example, kind of last year, a bunch of folks were sharing.
Yeah.
One guy in particular I can't remember where he was from.
Yeah.
Simon somebody or other, and someone kept sharing these things with me, and when I first watched, I was like, oh wow, I think it was like, election stuff and national security stuff, but I did a little more digging, and when I saw some other stuff the guy posted, I was like, man, I'm gonna steer clear of that one.
Okay. Yeah,
And so therefore,
Yeah.
if I either had already too quickly shared that person's video, I'll go back if I recall and delete it, because I don't want that to be
Okay.
so I do try to be careful. Now, if it says misinformation and then I check it and I'm like, oh yeah, this turned out to actually be proven untrue, then I would certainly be glad. I'd willingly take it down. But half the time I'm looking at it and I'm like, how can they say that's misinformation? It was actually a peer-reviewed study. Now, a scientist might disagree with the way the findings were interpreted, but the study itself was a study. Interpretation of statistics is always a tricky thing. Statistics tells a story and depends on what story you're trying to tell.
Okay.
How you use it. It's not that the results are a lie. It's how the results are used to tell your story.
If I can
That makes
address
sense.
one thing that you were
course.
talking about,
Yeah.
and how we're put into these categories of political stances and all these things. So when I wrote my dissertation, I will make clear I'm not on either side of the spectrum of any sort of political party. I feel like I probably more in the middle, or I don't even like to say any of that, because
same with me.
my stance is I have a lot of beliefs in a lot of different things.
Yep.
So, but when I did write it, and I was approached by a council member, town council member, and wanting to have a conversation with me, and I was thinking, yes, thank God, I just want to talk about it, and she was saying, well, why did you write it? Like in a kind of, not that she was defensive, but I could tell that there was a level of defense that maybe okay, I put her in this place, and I don't, I'm not really comfortable, I don't know what she's going to say, and all these things. Anyway, I was just really happy to have a conversation. But what I learned from that conversation is that people weren't reading that dissertation because they were putting me into the camp of Trump supporter,
Right,
right wing. I mean, everybody knows,
Yeah.
right? Like, if you have a dissenting opinion about these things, then you must be a Trump supporter. Then you must be a right wing crazy person, right?
Yeah.
And I laughed because I was thinking, well, first of all, even if I was, you as a public official represent me, right? Like, even if I was that, which I am not, don't you think that I still have a valid voice?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, which the hilarity though of that is a shift. So I've had the same thing over the last 20 months, if not longer. Is that an assumption made? That I'm a conservative right winger Trumpian, and I was like, well, not really. Frankly, kind of fall more in the ranks of libertarian, but
I do those assumptions then also, as it said, make it easier to dismiss it.
Absolutely.
100%.
Oh, you're
But that's
part of
exactly
that.
what
But
it
yeah,
is. So
so-
they were like, no, we're not reading this. I'm not even involving myself in this. And anybody that was they're like, oh yeah, she's having an opinion, we're putting her in this camp. Which I was like, this seems very unfair to me. Why can't I? Why can't I have these conversations? If you as a public official, you actually represent me. Whether I'm an incredible right-wing, crazy, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Well, I think the beauty of what you were saying is how as far as how does the alliance our alliance itself react or feel about these labels. I haven't spoken to everyone in the alliance. I would say of those I've spoken to last night at other meetings, we're a mixed bag of nuts.
It's pretty incredible
Are
how
there
mixed
some
we are.
Are there some true anti-vaxxers, if you want to call someone that, in our group? Yes, probably so. Are there middle of the road folks who, like myself, who both of my girls are mostly fully vaccinated? I think I might have missed a few at the end just because they felt like they just kept coming, like at the kindergarten age. But are a little bit skeptical of a brand new drug that is still under emergency use. Yeah, there's us in there as well. Are there Trump supporters in their group? Absolutely. Are there others in the group who probably more like Savannah and I would say, not that we're exactly the same, but we're kind of middle of the road folks, socially very liberal.
Yeah, it's a mixture of an
So it is a
incredible mixture
mixture
of everything, from
Yeah.
really religious to people to extremely not religious. religious
Yeah,
people
yeah.
to, I mean, everything. That's what's actually so amazing about it,
Yep.
and I feel like is so awesome because they can't label us because it's not true.
Well, they're trying.
And is the through, because like I said, the through line to me is like a bit of skepticism in possible in the popular narrative. But is there another through line that you guys
I
see?
don't think that our true one is like, hey,
No,
have
not
skepticism.
skepticism.
It's
No, no,
not
no.
that.
It's have you looked at our website
Yeah.
and read our mission statement?
Yeah.
Did you read the dissertation?
Everyone
Everyone should
That's
read
your
it.
homework
18
for
pages of it,
tonight.
yeah.
Essentially, as we formed and discussed, and we also had the discussion of, wanting to be sure what our messaging is. Like, even though one member might be against all vaccines, that's not our messaging. So we would not approve, so to speak, if that member were to write a letter and sign Mountain Freedom Alliance to it, because that's their personal opinion.
Yeah.
That doesn't represent
Yeah.
our alliance.
Sure.
Our alliance isn't
So what's
about
what's the
skepticism.
true- yeah.
It's about just transparency. It's about open discourse.
Okay.
100%.
It's about having a conversation, and then maybe occasionally, what one thought was true is proven to be untrue. I mean, that's what the beauty of science is that it's a constant, dynamic, changing dialogue between people who are inquiring, and that's not happening right now. We literally have this streamlined message. I mean, when you have individuals who are surveyed, and this was last year, individuals who were surveyed and they were asked what they thought the hospitalization rate was for their age group, and they literally thought it was like 10 times what it actually was. That's misinformation. So we're being accused of misinformation, but misinformation is when the messaging has planted absolute falsehoods in the public's mind. When I read emails from parents to public health, to Dr. Riddell about the mask order, and I cannot tell you, it was actually, I almost wanted to cry towards the end, how many, literally, it was clear they had a completely irrational level of fear regarding COVID. That's not to say we can't have a realistic concern for COVID for those who are vulnerable. That's realistic, right? Like, for me to be concerned of my elderly in-laws getting COVID, that's a real concern. For a parent to literally say, I am terrified to send my child to school without a mask, that's irrational. It's not based in science. It's not based in the reality of how COVID affects the majority of children. That, to me, is where there's misinformation.
Okay.
It's not what we're sharing.
Question, but when Facebook is flagging misinformation in your posts, do you understand why they're doing that?
That's an interesting. I'm not saying your question is weird. I'm just trying to think, like, do I understand why they're doing that? I don't. I think, I don't actually even, I don't spend really any time thinking about it. I see it and I think, oh, look, Facebook's up to it again. Like, I don't sit there. How do I explain this? Somebody that I have gained respect, with through even a short conversation. Yeah. If that person, even if you were to say, hey, I kind of I have a little question about what you just said, that I give credence to. You are a person sitting here who I've had a discussion with. You appear to be a thinking, intelligent human being. Okay. When Facebook flags my post, I don't sit there and see like, oh, gee, like Facebook doesn't believe me. I need to spend any time thinking about it. I literally don't think about it at all.
Okay, no, fair answer.
Yeah.
Right. And the reason I was asking is just there's a lot of sensitivity around there being around criticism of vaccines or maskings when the idea behind them is to save lives.
Yeah.
So like the idea that and just from what I've seen, like the reports, the studies that you're choosing to share are leading people to be more. They would lead people to be more resistant to the idea of getting a vaccine or of wearing a mask.
Well, here's the question: Is it like, okay, we don't want them to make a critical thought for themselves of whether they want to put those things into their body or not, or is it about transparency, saying, hey, we want you to get this vaccine because we believe that it is going to be safe and effective for you. Yeah. However, these are the ingredients. These are the known side effects. This is the studies that we have on them. And do you think it's okay for you to make that choice on your own?
Yeah.
What, you know?
I wonder like why, and you answered some of this at the beginning, but like why you would take that tack as just like a member of the public. Like, I was trying to
Okay. If you saw,
What was it?
it's like why we would, even if we're not anti-vaccine, why is it like for me in particular, am I sharing, generally I'm sharing studies that might lead someone to,
to not get the vaccine.
To question,
I mean, when
to
it
second
comes
guess.
down to it.
Well, I would not say that we're wanting anyone
Well,
to not get
No,
the vaccine.
I know, and I'm
Right,
not saying
right.
that you are. I'm just saying
Right.
that the post could lead to
Yeah.
that.
So, but me independently, not
Yeah.
speaking me as
Go
a
for it.
alliance member.
Yep.
If you say it's not even your child, I live on the street, and that's actually happened in my neighborhood when I was probably 18. But it's not even your child, but you see a kid playing with a ball in a driveway,
Yep.
and the ball's rolling towards the street, and you see a car coming. To me, it would be like not saying anything, because I am not anti-vaccine, but I have seen and I've read the 39-page document that FDA put out after they reviewed the Pfizer vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds. I actually watched the panelists, and I listened to the panelists and what they said, and how even they said, a number of them, that they had concerns about myocarditis.
Yeah.
And when we look at VAERS data, and we see how the numbers of reports are way higher than anything that's been reported for any other vaccine. To me, I am going to share as much information that will hopefully give someone else just enough of a balance of information that they might consider, okay, independently. My child already had COVID. They have immunity. Do I want to take, like, one of the men, and I encourage you to watch the panel, but one of the doctors who was one of the panelists who voted to approve it, he said, same thing I've been saying. He said, when have adults ever asked children to take the risk for them? He said this, right? So yes, I am sharing things on Facebook with a hope that people with very low risk children, family members who likely have already contributed to herd immunity. People are making this argument that like, if they don't get vaccinated, they're still a threat to those who are vulnerable. That's actually unproven. That is unproven. So
that's a tough decision for parents to make.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And
Heck yeah.
what I've seen is like the pediatricians in town more than happy to have that conversation with parents.
Yeah.
So that's the question I'd have was like, why not just be another voice directing people to have credible just conversations with their credible pediatrician.
Yeah, that too, for sure. But at the same time, we live in a world where information is available to any of us. And, even a pediatrician is not omniscient and maybe operating out of a school of thought that is different than another pediatrician. So, yeah, to me, I think that
But
it's
why-
not
I'm just
But
curious.
could they
Yeah.
not have this conversation? Say they have the information that maybe that they've heard from MFA or whatever. Then can they not bring that information to their
Right,
pediatrician?
absolutely,
And
yeah.
say, hey,
Yeah.
I have this concern. Can you walk me through this?
Yeah.
Right.
Because this seems confusing to me. That's what conversation they
Right.
should be having
Yeah.
with their pediatrician. Not, okay, I just take your word for it, even though I heard
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think it's empowering people to actually take their health into their own, in their own hands, to be advocates for themselves,
Yes.
be advocates
Yes.
for their children.
Yeah, and that's typically what I will say is when I share things is at the end I will say be informed.
Yeah.
I don't say don't get this vaccine. I don't say hashtag
Yeah.
no vaccine. I say be informed.
And-
Do your own research.
Yeah.
And because frankly, how terrible would I feel if I saw that ball rolling into the road
Yeah.
and I didn't say a thing? How terrible would I feel?
Well, I've already had that experience of having people that I've loved been very injured by the vaccine
Yes.
and not said anything.
Yeah.
So I've had that experience.
Yeah.
right.
So, okay. So do I just keep being quiet because everyone's saying get this vaccine because
Right.
it's going to help you. Okay, maybe it will, but also
Yeah.
just be aware that this is also a possibility.
And it may
Don't
be
you
a-
think you should just have that information?
And it may be a risk that's worth taking.
It may be a
like
risk
my
worth
father,
taking.
who's
Yeah.
73,
Yeah.
and he's had a heart attack, and has all these other health conditions. That's a risk that's worth taking for him.
Yeah.
But for example, a child who's 9 and otherwise healthy ending up in the ER with myocarditis, is that a risk that was worth taking? I don't think so. And here's a quick question for you. In all the years that maybe you've paid attention or not paid attention, we're obviously a little bit older than you. How often have you had people tell you they had like a terrible reaction to an influenza vaccine?
Right. Yeah. No. That's,
Like never, right?
No, it's
Well, how is
definitely
it
right.
that even though supposedly these reactions are very rare, in 6 months,
Yeah.
I know personally, I'm not talking Facebook, I'm not
Yeah.
talking brother of a cousin of a friend of a sister's mother.
Sure.
I'm talking personally, people who one woman was in the hospital here for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks. Can you imagine that hospital bill? I have another friend down in Afton. His son is still on blood pressure medication, and he was having to get shots in his eyes because his eyes were bleeding in between the membranes. Okay, blood clots, blood issues, blood disorder. This was after his second COVID shot. Okay, blood pressure shot up through the roof. His wife is a nurse. They willingly went and got the vaccine. He says now, he's not going to get the booster because he was sick. You're talking, he's probably up into the $20,000 to $30,000, and he had to have eye surgery.
Yeah.
They thought it was dried blood. It turned out to be still bleeding,
Yeah.
right?
Those, just to, I mean, because I know the horror stories are
Yeah.
out there. The
but
horror
they're not
stories,
being heard, actually.
The horror stories, though, I mean, if you and that, I mean, that's a
Yeah.
legitimate concern.
Yeah.
There are also so many horror stories about about COVID and the impact that it's having on people's
Just
lives.
I've actually just not personally had those stories in my own personal life.
And do you
but have
think
had
that would change your mind? Like if you
no, I've had some.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple.
Yeah.
No, maybe one or two.
I think once again it comes back to, would it change your mind as far as who?
Because like, I think a lot of
comorbidities,
people,
yeah.
I think a lot of people who are like, look, yes, this is a risk-benefit analysis,
Yes.
like, and it's a particularly difficult one for kids,
Yeah,
or
for parents
trying
making
to
that
make
decision
kids.
for their child. Yeah.
And then it comes down to, for a lot of folks, like the data which say, look, the risk of a vaccine injury is just magnitudes lower than the risk of COVID injury. Myocarditis.
Well, we don't
not-
really
that's
know that
not
yet.
actually
That's the thing,
real.
is that it's not even known yet.
Okay.
And even the FDA panelists even said
You're
that.
saying it's
It's too soon.
new,
Even the
too soon
FDA
to
panelists
say.
who approved it said,
Yeah.
they said, the direct quote pretty much,
You
we
would-
do not know the safety of this vaccine
Yeah. Okay.
until it's administered, basically.
Yeah.
They've said it.
Yeah.
So what's being approved to be messaged through mainstream media and what's not being flagged on Facebook is constantly saying safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective.
Yeah.
Those two words, actually, the jury's still out on them.
Yeah.
I mean, effective, Travis Riddell, in his request for the continuation or for the health order back in
Yeah.
September, said, unfortunately, we've seen that we were hoping the vaccines would be a standalone, but it's already proven not to be the case. So how can we say safe and effective when we're looking at a waning efficacy that is pretty much starting in about 3 months? That's not really that'd be like saying I'm selling you a car and it's got a warranty, but the warranty's like for 3 months because we're pretty sure it's gonna like crap out. I mean, it's just, so for me to provide that information, especially to young people, my daughter who's almost 19, she's old enough. I've told her, I said, you don't need my approval to get the vaccine, but I am going to highly suggest you just hold off a little bit. Give it some time. She's already had COVID, so she has made her contribution to ending this pandemic. Anyone who's had COVID has made their contribution. We've gotten it. We've recovered. We are now part of that body of people who are less likely to have severe disease from it.
Yeah, and I hear that, and I wonder, different health departments have responded differently to that. That's
Yeah.
becoming, you know, something that now the schools are cool with.
Yeah, they're accepting. Yeah.
I guess, yeah, I wonder, like, with the risks that are out there, like, it comes back to what I asked at the beginning, but it's like there are health departments across the country, including ours here,
Yep.
that are trying to make those tough decisions in terms of what they recommend, what they think the guidance should be, and it feels like that there's like a reluctance to trust them in that.
Yeah, I don't know if trust is like necessarily the word I would use. I don't
Well,
personally.
if a doctor was recommending something
Right.
to you, you might say, well, actually, I've heard these other 3 things about
Yeah.
that, so I'm not going to just like take your recommendation.
Right.
I would say that that's a lack of trust in the doctor.
Well, yeah. So for me, it's not like I feel that our public health department is literally sitting there and figuring out ways to trick us, you know, or tell us lies or
Okay.
keep secrets from us. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I do believe that they are operating from within a framework of which they feel the most comfortable. It's how they were educated, you know, under a specific CDC messaging protocol. And that's a whole nother story, is how the CDC
No,
is
sure, yeah.
really primarily funded. You know?
I think what the biggest thing
By
is,
Big
no matter,
Pharma.
no matter if any, you know, and like when you asked me, you know, would I change my mind about COVID?
Yeah.
I'm not dismissing the severity of the disease or the you know, that it affects people and has killed people, and I'm not dismissing that. However, I do feel like everyone should, with these known risks, should be able to make choices about their health that they feel like is best for them.
Yeah.
Not, I'm going to make the best health choice for you, and you have to do that because everyone thinks you need to do that. I think that it needs to be based on what's best for your family, for your health, and what that looks like inside of that. Because look where we are 2 years later almost, and we're in the exact same position that we were before. And we have implemented all of these measures, every single one
Right.
of them.
Right.
And how much has it really helped that much? It's not. It's created a lot of divide. Has it really done much? I mean, I don't know. We don't really know, but we do know the measures that it is, or what it's created that has caused a lot of issues. Mental health. I mean,
Yeah.
not only that, but economically personally, the mental health in my family, I mean, it's horrendous. It's horrible. And people that I know, a friend that I know that killed himself because of these very things. I mean, just so much has happened
Yeah.
because of these things. So have we created a problem that's actually worse than, or a solution that's worse than the problem? That's my question.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Barrington Declaration. That's what I wish everyone would be familiar with. These are Nobel laureates, doctors and scientists that have come together, that have put together a plan that said, hey, we know COVID, we know these things. What we need to do is put this in place that it protects the vulnerable. It does all these things. I really suggest you go read my dissertation. It's just information.
It's information.
But
yeah.
it was a way that, because you don't have you need economists
Yeah.
weighing in on how these mandates are going to affect the economy. Look
Yeah,
what it's done
yeah.
to
No,
our
you
economy.
need a diverse panel of individuals
Not
to
just
look
health
at.
officials, and that's
Yep.
exactly why
Yep.
we are set up as in the United States, why we are set up this way. So
Yep.
that not one entity is going to make the decisions for every single human in this country.
Right.
And that's what I believe is not really happening.
Yeah.
And so I do think it should be choice. I think that we do need to have differences of opinion coming together and making the best decisions
Yeah.
for the country.
I mean, I
for
look at
our
it.
state and
I
our
look at
county.
it as a forest. I picture like a forest on fire, and that public health is, literally trying to put out one tree. Like, we're just going to keep dumping water on this one tree when there's so many other trees that are on fire. But that's just not their lane. They're staying in their lane. As far as how I feel personally about advertising the vaccines to children, personally, I'm not going to speak for the Alliance, is I actually don't think we should be advertising a emergency approved only vaccine
no,
for
I
children.
got that
I
sense,
think that if
yeah.
parents seek that out on their own, that's their choice.
Yeah.
It's a hard decision to make as a parent.
Yeah.
But it is literally being advertised every day, from local public health all the way up to the top.
Yeah.
And it'll we'll see how that all plays out. You know?
Well, it is confusing
in the
going
end.
back to, why we are spending these taxpayer dollars in these, campaigns, advertising campaigns to promote the vaccine. Why are we not doing that same to promote health?
Right. Yeah, just in addition. Like that's what we've also asked and what Commissioner Epstein asked wasn't necessarily to say stop advertising this, but how about in conjunction with this we advertise some other things. There's some known protocols that limits severity of disease. We can use some of that, some of those funds for that as well. It's it just surprises me about this town, because I moved here and first learned about organic food here, first learned about yoga here, first saw a man in clogs here, and it was like I've been here 23 years and kind of, that this is where I learned about holistic medicine. This is where I learned to start making those decisions for my family. And all of a sudden it's like, where'd you go, Jackson people? All of a sudden it's like, what's in, is this locally raised beef? And then it's like, just whatever's brand new, give it to me because I'm afraid and I've been told to be afraid. And it's like, what happened to actually asking what's in this? How was it produced? Is it safe for me? It's a strange times.
Understood. Well, thank you guys for the time.
Yeah.
I've been here for an hour. I really appreciate it. I just have to hop into a couple other interviews today.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate you guys sharing. And,
Yeah, I appreciate your time. I actually appreciate you asking questions too, because it's nice to have a conversation. I mean, we don't even get this conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
would you? If you don't mind, we obviously have it recorded no matter. But oftentimes after things are printed and then they get fixed, it's a little late because once the printed version is out there, that's what people remember. They don't remember the correction.
Right.
Obviously, it's going to take you a little time to draft the whole article, but when you have specific quotes that you're going to use, will you please send them over to us so we can just
totally
make sure
do
that they're, not saying that you would ever intentionally do that, just gotta,
Happy to do that.
Thank you so
Happy to do that.
much.
Cool. All right, you guys have.
All right,
Thank you.
you have a great day as well.
Thank you.
I think that door's open.
Okay.
Yeah.